Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Crowell. I'm the owner of DHC Environmental Consulting. Um, Today, Scott Bryan with the Central Arizona Project will be giving a presentation on the biology and water quality of Central Arizona Project. Um, but before we start that, let me talk a little bit about since I'm the sponsor, about my business. Share my page here. I'm the owner of DHC Environmental Consulting. I manage lakes all around Central Arizona, specifically the Phoenix area. Um, we do everything from algae and aquatic weed control, harmful algae blooms. We can do cattail removal and control, general lake maintenance, various chemical applications. We do lake monitoring, temperature, oxygen profiles, water quality testing, little water feature management for these communities that have waterfalls for their entrances. You can do lake mapping, sediment removal coordination, specifically for the water features. I can do algae identification down to genus or species if desired, paraphyton identification, mosquito management, and midge fly management. Also, I can also do golden algae monitoring. I do it with a microscope. It's not the only way you can really do it. Recommend mostly for you California people, mostly Southern California has these issues. I know specifically Orange County has several lakes that get golden algae almost year round over there because of the consistent temperatures. But this can be tested through a microscope for detection or not. There really is no early detection for golden algae. You just have to identify it and really get at treating it and get it under control. With that said, I'm going to introduce Scott, and he can give his presentation on the Central Arizona Project.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, see if I can figure this out here. Share my presentation.
It's a little box with an arrow pointing up. There you go.
Yeah. All right, just want to make sure everyone can see that and hear me okay before we get going. We good, Doug? He's muted, so I'm going to assume it's working all right.
It looks like it's still loading. There we go.
Oh, you're good now. Up. Look good?
Yes.
All right. Technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Well, thanks again, Doug, and good afternoon to all of you, wherever you may be this afternoon. Might be a little bit different presentation than you're used to seeing on these webinars today, because I'm going to concentrate on Arizona. But since we do share the Colorado River, and a lot of you seem to be moving over here anyway, Doug and I thought you might have some interest in some of the things we're doing. So with that, I think we all have some time at the end for a few questions, but I'll go ahead and jump right into the presentation. Kind of what we're going to go over today. I'll start with a brief history and some facts about the CAP, give you some background on our system. Then I'll hit on our biology program, give you an overview of what that program is, then dig a little deeper on a couple of specific issues with quagga mussels, how we're handling them, and as well as our aquatic vegetation management in Lake Havasu. And then I'll switch over to our water quality program. Again, give a little bit of an overview of that, and then jump onto our Aquarius data management system, which I hope you might find of some interest. All right, CAP 101. So probably the first thing I want to tell you is that the Central Arizona Project, or CAP, it's the water conveyance system for Arizona's allocation of the Colorado River. It's basically equivalent to the Colorado River Aqueduct in Southern California, and that's operated by a Metropolitan Water District. So let me hit on a little bit of history of the river and how we started getting water. Colorado River Compact of 1922 was negotiated to divide the water resources. negotiated to divide the water resources of the Colorado River to try and make sure that everyone was able to share in its available water. The negotiation among the 7 basin states, and it divided the river into the upper and lower basins, with each basin getting about 7.5 million acre feet. At the time of the negotiations, there was an assumption that there was right around 16.4 million acre feet available for use, and that allocation of 15 million, the 7.5 between the 2 basins, would leave plenty of water for future development and for Mexico. Unfortunately, this assumption, sorry, my screen's going all over the place here. There we go. Unfortunately, the assumption kind of ignored the available science. From what I've read, the most extensive hydrology study at the time said there was about 14 to 15 million acre feet actually available. So the 15 million, 16.4 that they thought was available was quite a bit off. Jump into the next, the 1928 Boulder Canyon Project Act. This act authorized the construction of Hoover Dam and apportioned the lower basin allotment among Arizona, California, and Nevada. There's a number of acts later on that addressed water storage and power generation throughout the lower Colorado River, but this one was probably the first and probably the most important. This apportionment gave California the majority of the water, 4.4 million acre feet. Arizona got 2.8 million acre feet, and Nevada got just 300,000 acre feet. Arizona fought against this allocation for about 20 years for a variety of reasons, but it finally ratified the compact in 1944, which is the same time as when the treaty with Mexico was signed that allocated an additional 1.5 million acre feet. So jumping ahead to 1968, the Colorado River Basin Project Act was signed. It authorized the construction of the Central Arizona Project. The CAP was to be built by Reclamation, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and it allowed for the delivery of a majority of Arizona's river allocation to the most populous areas of our state. So basically 46 years after the Colorado River Compact was signed, Arizona was finally ready to take on some water. So design of the CAP began shortly after that act was signed. In 1971, the state of Arizona formed the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, or CAWCD. That district was formed to manage and operate the CAP system and oversee the repayment to the U.S. government for the construction costs. And by the way, I say CAWCD, and that's technically who I work for, but we're generally known to the public as CAP. So I'll kind of use CAP throughout most of the talk. Hopefully that doesn't cause any confusion, but it refers to both the entity that manages it and the system itself. So construction of the project began in 1973 with the Lake Havasu pumping plant. That was later renamed the Mark Wilmer pumping plant in honor of the lawyer that helped to secure Arizona's apportionment of the Colorado River. In the photo on this page, you can see the top floor of the pumping plant. That's the only thing that's exposed above ground. There's actually 6 floors that go below ground. It's an enormous pumping plant. So what you see is only a small portion of what's there. You can also see in that photo 2 of the large tubes that go up the mountainside, and they eventually empty into the aqueduct. Those tubes were later covered, so all you see right now is the actual mountainside if you were driving the highway over the pumping plant. After 20 years of construction, system was declared complete in 1993. It's kind of interesting, we actually started delivering water in 1985 before total completion. We were able to do that because the canal was finished. It's just our storage reservoir, which is Lake Pleasant, and I'll hit on that a little bit later. That wasn't completed until 93. So we were able to deliver water earlier than the actual completion. The total cost to build the system was $4 billion, and Arizona is required to pay back about $1.65 million of that. It's spread out over 50 years, beginning in 1994, and will finally be done paying in 2045. So we're a little over 20 years left, so we're a little over halfway of getting this thing paid off. The system itself was designed and built to convey up to 1.6 million acre feet of water at a rate of up to 3,000 cubic feet per second. So pretty large system. I always like to share a few pictures of the construction, some of the historical pictures. On the left side of the slide there is the concrete pour for the aqueduct. You can see it's just directly poured over compacted dirt. The concrete averages about 3 inches thick, and for the most part, there's only a few sections that are reinforced with steel, so it's just concrete. In the upper right, that is the construction of our intake towers at Lake Pleasant. This is our storage reservoir that's just north of the Phoenix area, so it's about halfway through the system. The construction of the towers and the dam, they expanded the size of the previous reservoir, which was Waddell Reservoir, expanded it from 3,000 surface acres to its current size of 10,000 surface acres. So almost or over 3 times larger than it originally was. The bottom right is the construction of one of our 14 pumping plants. Those pumping plants house the pumps that allow us to lift the water and then gravity flow it through the system. Just some facts and figures about the CAP. It originates, like I said, at the southernmost end of Lake Havasu on the Colorado River at the Mark Wilmer pumping plant. That's a photo of one of our pumps. There's 6 66,000 horsepower pumps. They lift the water more than 800 feet through those tubes that you saw in a previous picture. They lift it into the Buckskin Tunnel, which flows about 7 miles through a mountainside, before daylighting into an open-air aqueduct. The canal itself is 336 miles long. It stretches from Lake Havasu to areas just south of Tucson. Tucson is nearly 3,000 feet higher in elevation than Lake Havasu. So those 14 pumping plants along the system, they allow us to lift the water and then gravity flow it throughout its length. There's 10 siphons that take the water under various washes and rivers in central Arizona. And there's 4 tunnels that take it through various mountain ranges. And I guess lastly on that, the entire system is fenced and gated for safety and security, which is nice. We don't have a lot of folks jumping into the canal, but sure makes it a pain in the butt when you're traveling that 336 miles and you need to open a number of gates all the way through it. Mentioned Lake Pleasant a couple of times. It's our 10,000 acre storage reservoir, and really what that's for is to help us efficiently manage our flows in the canal. More importantly, it's operated to help to reduce our power costs. So what I mean by that is that CAP is Arizona's largest user of power. So having Lake Pleasant allows us to take advantage of favorable power rates. And what I mean is that when power is relatively cheap, and we can take the water from the Colorado River using those 6 large pumps, and the power costs aren't overly burdensome. But when those power prices get high, typically in the summer months, we can reduce pumping from Lake Havasu and switch over to Lake Pleasant and pump more efficiently to provide our water to the customers in central and southern Arizona. And speaking of our customers, here's our map of our service area. We supply over 80% of Arizona's population, primarily within Phoenix and Tucson metropolitan areas. Covers 3 large counties, Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima counties. Our current supply is allocated as 46% to tribal entities. They use that water for potable uses, irrigation uses, and other uses on the reservations, and 54% to municipalities. Prior to the river shortage situation, we had a relatively large amount of water going to our agricultural customers. Unfortunately, they were first on the list to see the cuts. They had the lowest priority for the water. Lastly, I just wanted to say that we do provide raw, untreated water to our customers. So this means we don't have any responsibility at all for the quality of the water, just that it's wet. We have a lot of folks, especially people living next to the canal, that think we should be a pristine water system. It should look like a swimming pool, and we hear a lot of concerns from them about things that are going on in the canal. But the reality is that it's just like any other river system, except that we have concrete sides, but we have all the organics, all the biological issues that a natural system might encounter. All right, quick print. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk about the CAP biology program. So from the time CAP was substantially complete, 1993, all the way up until 2011, we relied on reclamation and outside contractors to address any of the biological issues that were going on in the canal. Everything from fish movement, fish stocking, dealing with algae and vegetation issues, anything that came up, we contracted it out. We had an engineer, who CAP is mostly made up of engineers, but they managed all those contracts, but they really didn't have any background in biology. So there wasn't a formal program up until 2011. But then we saw some major things start happening in the system and in our source waters. You probably all know that quagga mussels were found in Lake Mead in lower Colorado in late 2007. So we hired a mussel expert to see if they were actually getting into the CAP system. That was in 2008, and as we expected, they were getting into the system. Then in 2010, aquatic vegetation in the Colorado River, Lake Havasu near our intake, started to become a real problem for us. So our engineers were getting a little overwhelmed with some of these biological issues. Contractors are getting expensive, as you can imagine, trying to take care of everything that was going on. So late in 2011, CAP decided it was time to hire a biologist and bring everything in-house. So that's where I came into the picture. I was fortunate enough to have the freedom to develop my own program basically from scratch. I do have a research background. I was with Arizona Game and Fish Department for about 10 years with the research branch. And when I was developing the program, I kind of developed it with that research mentality, focusing on long-term monitoring projects, long-term monitoring plans, specific research projects, and targeted management activities. So when I first came on with CAP in 2011, they told me obviously about some of the issues that were going on, but really you're thinking it's a canal. What could possibly be going on? It's just a straight system of water. And I quickly learned when I got on board, there's a number of things that are happening in the system, and it's a more complex system than we see just from visually looking at it. Some of those challenges, I'll talk about quagga mussels and aquatic vegetation in Lake Havasu in some more detail as we move on here. So I'm going to skip those for now. But we also occasionally have aquatic vegetation in the canal system. Vegetation as far as rooted aquatic vegetation, not algae. But since we deliver for a variety of uses, whether it's agriculture or municipalities or whatever uses they may be, chemical control is not real popular. So that's something we've shied away from over the years. So basically, I designed that program just to use biological controls, and we use grass carp throughout the system. They've done a fantastic job for us. They keep us virtually weed-free throughout the year. I never really thought of caddisflies as being a nuisance species until I got to CAP. As a fisherman, you love to see a hatch of caddisflies because that means it's time to grab the rod and reel and head out to the lake or stream and do some fishing and match the hatch. But in CAP, we get these massive hatches that go into the backyards of residents that are living along the canal. Makes things pretty unbearable for them. I've gone into backyards to visit some folks when it's occurring, and they get into your drinks, they fly into your face, they're all over the place. So it does become a problem for residents living next to the canal. We've gone through a lot of trials to try to control them, try to do mechanical removal, some chemical work, but we really haven't found that silver bullet that takes care of them. So that's kind of where some of our fisheries management comes into play, along with the grass carp that we stock for vegetation control. We also stock channel catfish for insect control, and we target those areas where our residents are seeing the most issues. They do a pretty good job of eating the caddisflies. They do reduce the population slightly, but the biggest benefit is the public loves to see that stocking truck pull up, knowing that we're trying to do something to help out the issue. Unfortunately, it doesn't eliminate them, but it does provide some level of control. And we continue to work with like Bullhead City and some folks along the river, as well as our counterparts at Salt River Project to try to find that silver bullet. Unfortunately, there hasn't been anything yet, but we continue to look at it and monitor the situation. Wildlife migration, the wildlife along the canal are everywhere. We traverse, like I said, 336 miles of the state, so we have a lot of different habitats. When the canal was built, it basically created a barrier across the strait that limited wildlife movement. So during construction, they included a number of wildlife bridges that allow for that connectivity to go back and forth across the canal. We also have a number of wildlife drinkers, and we see a lot of activity at those drinkers. So a biology program monitors and maintains these features along the canal. Besides the quagga mussels, we also have a number of other invasive species in the canal. Colonial hydroids are one of them. This picture shows rock snot. It's been pretty problematic in recent years. It's a favorite around here just to be able to say rock snot, and it's pretty evident from that picture where it gets its name, but it does cause quite a problem for us and our customers. So we're constantly monitoring things like rock snot and other invasives and trying to work towards solutions for them. Water quality, as all of you know, well, I'm going to hit on water quality more extensively in some later slides, but really aquatic biology, everything that happens because of water quality. So we monitor it pretty closely and incorporate that into our biology program to help us better manage the biology. And finally, the integrated pest management. I'm not sure how exactly that got put on my plate, but it's a program that got put on my plate to monitor and direct how we handle our program to control terrestrial weeds and insect pests along the canal system. So a lot of various things going on with our biology program. I just have a fisheries education, so I quickly became educated in all things plants, fisheries, wildlife, and insects, and trying to handle all of the different challenges that CAP has to deal with. Let me dive a little bit deeper into quagga mussels, let you know what we're working on with quaggas, or what we've done in the recent past anyway, to try to manage them. I'll give you a relatively brief interview. I'm not going to talk about the biology of them at all. We're just going to talk about kind of their impact to CAP and what we're doing. As I mentioned earlier, they were first discovered in Lake Mead in the Colorado River in 2007. We brought in an expert in 2008. It was Renata Claudy. You may be familiar with her. She's kind of the worldwide expert in all things quagga and zebra mussels. So we brought her in to see first if they were in our system and then how we'd be impacted. So initially in 2008, she did a survey of the entire system and basically found young quagga veligers throughout our entire system. So we knew we had them, and it was time to look into what we needed to do about them. So we had Renata take a look and do a risk assessment, especially at our pumping plants, our 14 pumping plants, and see where we were going to be most at risk for any kind of any kind of impacts that would be caused by the quaggas. And she concluded after her study of all 14 plants and the system itself is that, I'll read what she said: because of the violent forces of the water in our system from both pumping and lifting, that the mussels would not become prolific in the CAP. So that gave us a little bit of comfort in knowing that that we weren't going to have quagga issues. And I don't want to throw Renata under the bus or anything, but because we don't have severe issues, but the quaggas have become pretty prevalent in our system. Potable water intakes, filtration, strainers, pump intakes, we pretty much find them just about everywhere. But again, thankfully, they've really not had any negative or severe impacts to most of our system. A little bit of extra maintenance here or there, a little extra cleaning or backwashing of filters and strainers, but for the most part, they're just there and they don't cause a big issue for us. There is one exception to that, though, and that's within our cooling water system at the Mark Wilmer pumping plant on Lake Havasu. And to Renata's credit, that's where she said we would probably have the biggest problem. So a little bit about our cooling water system. It works kind of like a radiator on each one of the units. The picture in the upper center there shows one of these cooling units. There's actually 4 of those that go around the entire unit. So cooling water comes in directly from our forebay, goes through a coarse strainer, and then into the header box of these radiator-like coolers. Then it moves through the tubes and removes heat from the unit as it's running. The photo on the upper right is the thermograph of one of those coolers when it's running pretty hot. We'd like to see those colors be blue and purple. That means it's running good and cool. When it gets the red, yellows, and greens, then it's a problem. And when it gets excessively hot, the units trip and shut down. Obviously, it affects the reliability of our system. So when it's running hot like that, what we do is we basically disassemble each one of those cooling units. The photo on the lower left is what we typically see when we take those apart and it's been running hot. It's a combination of quagga mussels, colonial hydroids, and then the sediment that builds up in there because of the slowdown in water. The buildup like this prevents the normal flow of water through the tubes, and that's when we see the issues. Once they're taken apart, we clean them out with a power washer and then reassemble the units. And it seems like a pretty simple process, but actually taking apart everything, the manpower and parts to tear those down, cost about $100,000 for each unit. So all 6 units, when we're having to do those, it's well over $500,000. At first, it was about every 3 years, so it was something that we were willing to handle. Some of those parts needed maintenance anyway, so it kind of fell in within a maintenance structure. But then it started happening every year, and we're having to pull all 6 of those out every year. So it was really becoming a cost burden for us. So that's kind of when they turned to me and said, we need to find something here. And one of the first things we tried was a foul release coating in our header boxes. That photo on the right shows you that foul release coating after about a year of being in place. Colonial hydroids, they're still all over it. It didn't stop them from attaching. Didn't see many quagga mussels, so that was a good thing, but the hydroids were still there. But that the material, the foul release coating was actually bubbling and flaking off after just 1 year. So it didn't look like it was going to be a very good solution for us. So I started looking into some other possible solutions. One of the first things I looked into was our UV treatment for the cooling units. Hoover Dam, Davis Dam, Parker Dam, Reclamation's installed those at each of those dams to control their quagga mussels. And it's been very effective for them. They have very good control of quaggas with UV. What we did find, and this is one of Renata Claudi's studies as well, is that it really didn't control the hydroids. So we're having a problem with the hydroids as well, and the UV wasn't going to take care of that. But the bigger problem was the cost of the system. They were able to keep it fairly low in those dams because they have a lot of room to work, and installation was relatively easy. Within our pumping plants, they're pretty tight, and there just wasn't a whole lot of room for installation. So we're going to have to get pretty creative on how we put it in there. And once we did the kind of background study on it and engineering on it, it really was a cost that we couldn't absorb. It's too expensive. So we started looking into to other alternatives, and one of them that I found was EarthTech. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but it's a copper-based product. It's now been labeled for quagga and zebra control. So I worked closely with the manufacturer. We did a 12-month pilot test on one of our 6 units to determine if it would be effective in controlling quaggas and hydroids. So we took apart a unit, get it all cleaned out, reassembled it, and that's when we started the 12-month treatment. We used dosage ranging from 0.5 to 0.75 parts per million, so pretty low dosages. And what we found after 12 months is that EarthTech prevented attachment of 100% of attachment of quagga muscles and all other biological growth. They were completely clean after 12 months. So just some photos of the system there. You see the skid, pump and skid were mounted to the wall. Had a couple barrels there full of the product. It was injected just above the strainers, or just upstream of the strainers. And then that picture on the bottom left there, that's a video scope of the header box when the units were still running. I think that one's about after 7 months, and you can see it's basically 100% clean. There was nothing going on in there. Looked the same way after 12 months. So looked pretty successful, and we jumped in with both feet. We installed the injection points at all 6 units with a single distribution tank above the surface there. We got done with that in 2020 and started treating in October of 2020. To this date, we're a little over 3 years of treatment. Still 100% control. We don't have quaggas or hydroids in there. The sediment moves right through it, doesn't get caught up in those organisms that are there. So it's been a success story, I guess, for us. We continue to play around with the dosage rates. I got it down to about 0.5 parts per million. We're spending just $20,000 a year on chemical for that. And so it's really a huge savings for us over disassembling those in the whole cleaning process. So the EarthTech has worked well for us. Talk a little bit about the aquatic vegetation in Lake Havasu, more specifically, I guess, our intake channel, just to kind of get you oriented. This photo is the intake channel. It's about 65 acres. You can see the Mark Wilmer pumping plant. It's kind of in the bottom center of the screen there. There's a jetty that was built that separates our intake channel from the Bill Williams National Wildlife Refuge. And that's where the Bill Williams River comes in. Let's see, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but up here kind of in the center left side, that's where Parker Dam comes, that's where the river splits off to Parker Dam. So again, 2008, we started seeing vegetation growth in the lower portions of Lake Havasu. It started really becoming problematic for us in 2010. A lot of folks out there say that's because that's when the quagga mussels came in, kind of coincided with that whole thing. Quagga mussels clear up the water. They allow more sunlight penetration, and we get the vegetation growth. There's no real evidence that those two are tied together, but it kind of makes sense. So we can go along with that. We'll blame it on the quaggas. Yeah, our problem really isn't with the vegetation growing. It doesn't really slow down water flow or anything for us. The problem comes when that vegetation dies, and it kind of comes in waves. So it starts dying in July all the way through September and October. When it dies, it floats to the surface and creates these huge mats. And then those mats are pulled into our trash racks. They get stuck in there. They start creating differential on our pumps, and then our units are shut down. And again, that affects the reliability of our system. Those mats can be relatively small. They can be even up to two acres in surface size, is about the largest we've seen that we've had to collect or had to deal with on the CAP side. I think it was 2018. Parker Dam had one that was about 6 acres in size, and that prompted them to put some trash rakes on their system over there at Parker Dam. But 6-acre mat of weeds will shut down things pretty quick. The vegetation that we're seeing is primarily horned and sago pondweed. We do see a lot of southern and spiny naiad, so kind of 2 different growing seasons. The pondweed's early season, the naiad kind of comes in later and grows at a later time. We also see some curly leaf pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil. Those are pretty rare, but we do see some of those other species as well. From 2010 to 2012, we hired a weed harvesting contractor to come in and remove that vegetation before it made its way to the pumping plant. Working with those contractors got a little bit difficult. They kind of on their own time frame, and it was a different time frame when the weeds were coming in. So they had to be on call, and when they're on call, they just started charging more. It became really difficult for us, I guess, and complicated. So we decided to buy our own equipment and take care of the problem ourselves. But just like the contractors ran into, our running the weed harvester gets expensive, and it ties up our manpower, and they could be working on other things. So we've tried various things over the last few years, a lot of different approaches. You can see a lot of vegetation there in those photos, but we've used cranes with buckets, long reach excavators, the weed harvesting boat. We've installed a trash rake system that was specifically designed for this issue. So mainly mechanical removal, but different approaches with that. And you can see there in that photo, the trash rakes didn't go so well for us. Even though they specifically designed it for the weeds that we have, every time we get those large mats in, that system buckles and breaks and basically is inoperable. So we've decommissioned a lot of those individual rakes, and we don't rely on that anymore. We're back to the harvesting boat as our primary system. I did a couple of years, I did try to use a copper-based herbicide out there, a Harpoon granular, to try to provide some level of control. We really didn't have much luck with it at all. It didn't do anything for us. So kind of jumping back up there, but from 2010 to 2018, mostly mechanical removal, we averaged over 1,450 hours, man hours harvesting weeds at a cost of about $265,000 each year, and we collected about 1,300 cubic yards of weeds each year. So I use BioBase. I don't know if any of you folks have ever used that before, but another great tool out there. I map the vegetation from April through September every month out there, just to kind of monitor what's going on and determine where we need to target our efforts for the mechanical removal. The vegetation heat map that you see in that picture, that was one of the worst I've seen out there. That was 2018. That vegetation takes up well over half of the intake channel, completely covered with weeds. Vegetation on the nearest the jetty there, where it's red, it's about 25 feet tall, 25-foot tall stands of pondweed in that case. So the vegetation was really starting to choke out our intake channel. So I wanted to make another run at trying to control the vegetation with aquatic herbicides. So in 2019, I put out an RFP, got some feedback from some vendors, and ultimately decided to go with Endothol. I applied Cascade in a single test treatment, 5-acre test plot at about 5 parts per million. See if we could take care of that vegetation. So there's upper left, there's the pre-treatment in 2019. That was in May of 2019. That's the vegetation that was growing. Within the first 3 weeks, but even actually within the first week, we had nearly 100% control of the vegetation that was present. And again, that was mostly pondweed that was nearest the jetty. About 5 weeks in, we started seeing new growth of naiad kind of throughout the system. So we didn't have 100% control, but naiad growth was late enough that it didn't form those large weed mats, and give us a little bit of relief in 2019. But overall, we're pretty hopeful about those results. They turned out pretty good for us, and we decided we'd continue the program. Over the past few years, I've continued to modify the timing and treatment, try to dial in the most effective approach to the weeds out there. So kind of jumping ahead to 2022, in 2020 and 2021, like I said, I was playing around with different dosages, and we had some mixed results with that. But 2022, we hit it hard again. You can see in that photo some pretty significant growth of pondweed along the jetty. We also had growth of spiny naiad in the deeper areas. So we decided to target some areas with 2 different treatments. One along the jetty, which is dominated by the pondweed, and then we broke that into 2 separate 5-acre plots. And then the one in deeper water is dominated by the naiad. So our combination of herbicides, sorry, it's moving a little slow, but we used liquid endothol or cascade in the along the jetty to try to control that pondweed. We added rhodamine dye to the application, and the manufacturer UPL was out there on the lake with us. They installed some sensors to try to see where that dye or where the chemical was actually going, to see if we got a good treatment or not. They installed those at different depths throughout the treatment area, and then we also applied Aquathol Super K granular to the deeper water areas to try to control that naiad. So we did see some mixed results with that, but we had 100% control of the naiad and using that Super K in those deeper areas. So really great results. We hit it hard at the label maximum, and we're able to eliminate all of the vegetation growing in that plot. It actually even drifted into some of the other areas and cleared out vegetation around the plot as well. Mixed results in the liquid cascade area where we did the 10 acres of treatment. Didn't know exactly what was going on until we were able to pull that sensor data. Basically, we found out that our weighted hoses weren't getting low enough, so we're only basically burning off the tops of that vegetation. So we weren't real effective. So we got some additional tinkering to do. We're going to get those hoses deeper, travel a little slower speed, get that chemical down to the base of the plants, and try to do a better job next time around. Go over some numbers. I showed you some of those before. Is this herbicide treatment working for us? Again, 2010 to 2018, 1,450 hours, 1,300 cubic yards of material, at 265,000. Since we started that herbicide treatment in 2019, the man hours decreased a little bit. The amount of vegetation that we're collecting is next to nothing, and our costs are about half as what they were. So, and that doesn't include our application costs and the chemical costs. That's just the weed harvesting part. So that brings the number back up a little bit. But as we make our supervisors or get our supervisors of our crews that run those weed boats, so we get them more comfortable that this herbicide treatments are actually doing the job out there, they can pull their men off of there. They don't have to have them sitting out there waiting for that vegetation to come up and attack it with the weed harvesting boats. So as we get them more comfortable, hopefully those man hours continue to decrease, and the cost decreases as well. So pretty good success so far. Again, we're still tinkering with it. One of the things you might ask is what happened in 2023? Where's that data? Well, it's a pretty unique year for us. It's a little hard to explain in a short amount of time, but I'll kind of give a brief overview. Basically, the Bill Williams River comes into Lake Havasu just on the other side of that jetty. In spring of 2023, winter and spring of 2023, much like you in California, we had a lot of precipitation, a lot of snow, a lot of rain events. filled up our reservoirs. So the reservoir at the upper part of that Bill Williams River, Alamo Lake, Corps of Engineers runs it. They needed to spill. They needed to get some water out of there. So they pushed water down the Bill Williams River. And what that did was bring in a lot of precipitation, a lot of sediment, a lot of debris. There was a fire in the area a couple years back, so it brought in a lot of material from that fire and created quite a mess in that lower part of Lake Havasu. We ended up shutting down our pumps for about 7 days so that we weren't pushing all that initial surge of material down to our customers. And you can see in that photo that jetty actually does a pretty good job of protecting our intake channel when our pumps are off. Unfortunately, we needed to get those pumps running again, and once we did, it started to mix everything up. The turbidity, it spread all throughout our intake channel. Thankfully, the major surge of material was already gone, so we didn't have much to worry about there. But we did have turbidity in the intake channel. So the upside of that was that it completely shaded out growth during the months of April, May, and part of June. We had absolutely no vegetation growth throughout the year in the intake channel. So there was no harvesting, no treatment necessary, and virtually no cost. So not exactly a management strategy we want to go with in the future, but we do know now that when we do have that high turbidity, it might help us out with the weed problem. Okay, switch gears again. I'm just going to hit briefly on our water quality program before we wrap it up here. Basically, as I mentioned earlier, we delivered raw, untreated water to our customers. So in all of our contracts with customers, it explicitly says we do not warrant the quality of our water. So the customers are basically at the mercy of whatever our source water is. But that being said, our contract with Reclamation for operating and maintaining the canal, states the operation and maintenance of facilities shall be performed in such a manner that is practicable to maintain the quality of raw water. So essentially, we can't operate the system in a way that's going to alter the source water. Obviously, in order to know you're not having an impact, you need to know what the water quality is. So we have a pretty extensive monitoring program. So as soon as we started delivering water in 1985, CAP contracted with USGS to develop a water quality sampling program and to actually do the physical sampling. So USGS was in charge for about 10 years, 1985 to 1995. In 1996, we brought that in-house, and we've been doing our own monitoring ever since then. The program's primarily customer service driven, so our mission is basically geared towards providing information and recommendations to our internal and external customers. I'm not going to read through each one of those mission statements, but you can basically see that each one of those bullets is tied to the goal of sharing information, goal of monitoring and providing that information. So some of the highlights of our current program. Within the canal in Lake Havasu, we take monthly grab samples at 7 locations for our priority constituents. When I say priority constituents, those are ones that are determined by our customers as being most important. I'll show you that list in a minute to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking for or what we're testing for. We do semi-annual grab samples at 4 of our locations. Those samples are to target more of the rare contaminants. I think there's about 300 of those parameters we test for on a semi-annual basis. I think it's about 99.9% non-detect on those, but we do test for them semi-annually just to keep an eye out. We have continuous monitoring at 2 locations. Those are your typical water quality constituents: pH, DO, temperature, conductivity, TDS. Just using hydrolabs that are permanently installed in the system to give us real-time data. And then we have 5 real-time turbidity stations. Turbidity is one of those constituents that our customers, our municipal customers, have said this is one of the most important things we look at. So we have 5 stations throughout the system to track what turbidity looks like throughout the length of the canal. Lake Pleasant, we sample a little bit harder, and that's because we have some water quality modeling that we do in there. We have monthly grab samples at 3 locations. We do the semi-annual grab samples at 1 location right at the intakes. And then we have bi-weekly vertical profiles throughout the lake. We've also added some more extensive algae and chlorophyll sampling in the canal and our source waters, as well as some periphyton sampling. And we keep an eye on those, close eye on those taste and odor compounds, MIB and geosmin, as we use Lake Pleasant and start to get into some of those lower sediments that were disturbing. We try to keep an eye on taste and odor compounds. There's that list of priority water, priority water quality constituents we look at. I think there's about 49 of them on there. That's what we test for each month with those grab sample locations. So a pretty wide variety of constituents we're looking at. The canal itself, it provides some unique challenges to our sampling. It runs about 17 to 24 feet deep and flows up to 3,000 cubic feet per second. Sides have a 2-to-1 slope, so it's really hard to get into the canal or to get to the middle of the canal to get a good sample. We do have the structures on the system. I mentioned before the wildlife bridges. We have drainage overshoots, check gates, some other structures that allow us to access the middle of the canal. Helps us get the most accurate representation of our water quality. For our grab samples in the canal, we drop small pumps in approximately 6 feet deep. They pump water directly into sample bottles. We use that same pump in Lake Pleasant, but we do sample from three different depths, 15, 45, and 90 feet in the lake. So we're hitting above and below the thermocline. For some of our sampling, like the algae and chlorophyll, obviously the pump causes damage to algal cells. So we sample with Van Dorn or Kemmerer samplers to grab those samples at the various depths that we're targeting. The multi-parameter probes we use are pretty typical. Like I mentioned, hydrolab in the canal itself. We use in situ in the lakes, providing us those common parameters: temperature, DO, pH, conductivity, and such. And then we do the depth profiles with that in situ sensor as well. Our real-time sensors are installed in stainless steel tubes, run down the canal liner. They're either connected directly to our CAP SCADA system, or in more remote areas, we work from a satellite system, and the data is uploaded every 15 minutes. So all that sampling means there's a heck of a lot of data that we need to manage. For over 20 years, that data was just stored in Excel files, PDFs, just paper napkins, wherever it may be, and pretty difficult to go back in history and look at any trending or look at what they've been seeing in water quality. So in 2020, we worked with Aquatic Informatics to migrate all of our lab and field data into their Aquarius data management system. And that's where our data is housed today. What you're looking at there is a screenshot of the Aquarius samples. That's where all the lab data comes in. We have almost 220,000 records in there. It continues to grow every day. It's a pretty good data management system, and gives us a lot of different ways to look at the data, export the data, and do different things with it. All of the real-time data that comes in, and that's every 15-minute data, so there's a lot coming in. That's stored on another module with Aquarius known as time series. Again, you can do a lot with time series as far as viewing the data, looking at the trends, doing your QA, QC, another good tool for keeping track of that real-time data. And then the one I'm really most proud of, I guess, and really wanted to show you was the third module that we're using, and that's known as Web Portal. This is where all of that data becomes available to the public. And it's just been a fantastic tool for us. Our customers use it all the time. We reference the public to it whenever they have questions about our water quality. It's an off-the-shelf product. It basically comes with all the background stuff, but we custom designed it for CAP, and we've rebranded it now as AquaPortal. And I do have a link up here. I was going to walk through a few things with it just to show you how AquaPortal works. And see if we can move it over here. You see that okay? So that is our AquaPortal splash screen, I guess, where you come in. That's the welcome to AquaPortal. It just gives some various information about CAP, our monitoring program, and how to navigate around AquaPortal. And then there's a number of dashboards on the left you can look at over here. The current conditions, that gives our real-time water quality data from our sensors on the canal, turbidity data on the bottom there. Time series charts that shows the most recent data as it loads up here, just 7-day data. Right now I just have one of our real-time sensors on there, but all the turbidity data as well. Our Lake Pleasant data kind of tells you a little bit more about our storage reservoir, Lake Pleasant, its current elevation, some different infographics on there tell you whether we're pumping in or out of the canal system. Alamo Lake releases. I talked about Alamo Lake and how they sometimes need to release into the Bill Williams River. We keep general information about that on here at all times. When there actually is a release, we start putting real data onto this page, and our customers use that quite a bit. Have all our annual water quality reports, or the most recent ones, on there, so users can jump in there and look at a PDF of the water quality reports, as well as our annual biology reports. So a lot of information on our dashboards. We hit the map here. This is one of the cooler functions, I guess, of AquaPortal, and gives you a way to look at our canal system. So it's really good for a system like ours, where you can see some differences along the entire system. It comes preloaded with the NOAA precipitation forecast, so we can see the folks down there in the southeast are getting hit pretty hard by rain. But
I'm not sure if you're sharing your screen properly.
Oh.
We're still looking at the Welcome to CAP AquaPortal
okay.
page. So I don't know if maybe a different window, if you try sharing a new window, the window that you're actually talking about.
Let me see if I can do that. Thank you for letting me know. Maybe it's this one. How about that? Is that showing a map now?
Yes.
Thank you for doing it, for letting me know.
Of course.
So now I got to go back over my cooler map function here, but I'm kind of sorry you missed all that on the dashboards, but there they are on the left there. You can click through those and see what each one of them has to offer. On the map itself, let me move it over here. Can you still see the map?
Yes.
Okay, great. Like I was saying, the NOAA precipitation forecast is on there, and you can see what's happening in your own area or all around the U.S. And there's the CAP system with all of our various sampling sites on there. If you go over to the parameters up in the top, you can choose any one of the parameters. We'll throw in arsenic. There's all the sites that we sample for arsenic. Click on the latest value, and that's our latest lab results for arsenic. And you can click on each individual point, get more information about the site itself and other information about the sample. Let me flip that over to a real-time constituent. I'll throw turbidity up there. There's the turbidity from all 5 of our sensors. That's the current values. You can go back in and see what a 24 or 48 hour average is, kind of however you want to look at it. So the map's a great tool for looking at what's going on all over our system. And then the third one there, the data set. Go through, you can pick a location, the Mark Wilmer pumping plant. It's already chosen alkalinity. So you can see all the historical data that we've collected since we started collecting data, 1996, and CAP started collecting data. So it's a good way to look at historical trends in the constituents. So what you're seeing right now is the public view of Aqua Portal. There's also a way up on the upper right here, you can see there's a sign in. Most of our stakeholders, our customers, have a login, and once they log into the system, that the 3 tabs on the left becomes about 7 of them, so you can do different things with the data, creating your own charts, your own data, export your own data, manipulate it however you want to, and it gives them a way to, and it provides a way for them to look at the data in a different way, and also gives them a few extra I guess calculations that we provide that aren't necessarily provided to the public. So it becomes a secure site. So now I got to figure out how to get back to sharing the presentation. I guess that's the end of it anyway, so I don't need to do much with it here. Hear that. Okay, that is the end of it. So so I appreciate your time today, and I don't know if we have any extra time or if I'm at the end here. If you want to ask any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah.
That was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Looks like Bill Taylor has his hand raised for a question.
Go ahead, Bill. No?
Any other questions? Any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. So with all the harvesting that's done, what do you guys do with the harvested material?
There's a staging area that up above the pumping plant there, and basically throughout the year, it's just kind of where it's laid out to dry. And then I believe they work with some local folks in Lake Havasu to either dispose of or use that material.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is this webinar, was it recorded?
It is.
Okay, so it'll be on the call page.
Yeah, we'll send out a link with the recorded webinar.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, looks like Bill raised his hand again.
Hey, Bill, you had a question?
Bill, you might be on mute. If you look down below, click on the microphone button and that will unmute you. Or I might just see if I can do it. No. Bill, also you can type your question into the chat box, which is on the lower right hand corner. All right. Well, if it's done by mistake, just email Scott your question. We'll give it about 30 seconds, and then we'll conclude this webinar if we don't hear anything. Oh, lastly, one more announcement. So next month is our last webinar for this season. It is about managing water bodies with competing needs, a case study of the management of weeds and algae. The date of that is June 12th, 2024, and we will send out an announcement, so keep an eye out. And thanks again, Scott, for the call, and thank you, Doug, for hosting it.
Yes, thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much, everybody. And if Bill still has a question in November, I'll be at the NOMS meeting, and we can hook up then. So
There you go.
All right, sounds good. All right, thanks for your time, everyone, and we will see you next month at our next meeting.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Bye.